The mahogany table gleamed under the recessed lights, reflecting the anxious faces gathered around it. The air in the room, usually smelling faintly of vanilla and spice from the test kitchens downstairs, was thick with tension and the sterile scent of polished wood and strained ambition. On the wall behind my father, Robert, hung a framed collection of awards the company had won over the years, many for the Golden Reserve line, my life's work. They used to say, Harvest and Hearth Provisions is a family business, built on passion. Apparently, some family members and some passions were more valued than others. My name is Stella. For the last 15 years, I've poured my heart and soul into this company, specifically into developing our signature line, Golden Reserve. It wasn't just food. It was art, a delicate balance of science and intuition, a unique preservation and flavoring technique that gave our jams, preserves, and spiced nuts their unparalleled depth and shelf life without artificial additives. I started in a tiny lab, working nights and weekends, experimenting with cultures and ferments while others were out living their lives. I missed holidays, canceled dates, and spent my 30th birthday coaxing a stubborn batch of apricot starter culture back to life. The Golden Reserve didn't just become the heart of Harvest and Hearth, it became my heart. It took us from a respected regional supplier to a national name, courted by high-end retailers. And now, here I sat across from my father, watching him steeple his fingers, a familiar gesture that usually preceded a pronouncement. Beside him was my younger brother, Daniel. He fidgeted slightly, his eyes fixed on the table, dressed in a suit he clearly wasn't comfortable in. Stella, my father began, his voice smooth but devoid of warmth. As the market evolves, Harvest and Hearth must adapt. We need to streamline, to scale efficiently. To that end, the board, in agreement with myself, has decided to restructure. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I had seen this coming, the subtle shifts, the closed-door meetings. Daniel will be stepping into a leading executive role, overseeing product development and strategic growth, Robert continued. He has a strong grasp of the business side. Your role, Stella, will transition to a senior advisory position. You will consult on ongoing projects, but the day-to-day management of the Golden Reserve line and its future expansion will fall under Daniel's purview. He finished, offering a small, tight smile. We feel this best positions the company for the future. My breath caught in my throat. An advisory position. It was a polite way of saying, we're taking your creation and putting someone else in charge, someone we trust more. Someone who I knew wouldn't know the first thing about the delicate balance of pH and time that made Golden Reserve unique. I looked at Daniel. He still wouldn't meet my eyes. My brother, who I'd shown my earliest starter cultures to, who'd watched me excitedly explain the fermentation process, now sat there, accepting control over something he couldn't begin to replicate. I inhaled slowly, gripping my hands under the table. I see, I said, my voice steadier than I expected. So, Daniel is taking over Golden Reserve development. Robert nodded, pleased by my apparent calm. Exactly. He's ready to take the reins. All right, I said, pushing back my chair and standing up. Understood. I walked over to my brief bag, opened it, and pulled out the official company binders and my company-issued tablet containing all the documented Golden Reserve protocols, the ones they thought were complete. I placed them on the table in front of Daniel. Here are the official production protocols and notes for Golden Reserve, I said. My eyes met Daniel's briefly, and in that flicker, I saw a mix of triumph and unease. Just make sure you have everything you need for the Ms. Jenkins presentation next week. I paused, adding softly, replicating it perfectly, especially at scale, requires attention to detail. I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving behind the polished wood, the stale air, and the heavy silence. The betrayal didn't scream. It whispered, a cold, insidious sound that followed me down the hall. They had taken my heart, or at least, they thought they had. But they didn't know I had kept the secret ingredient, the true spark, locked away where no one else could find it. Walking out of that building felt like leaving a part of myself behind. 15 years. 15 years of early mornings, late nights, the smell of fruit and spices staining my clothes, the hum of the incubators as comforting as a lullaby. I had poured my identity into Harvest and Hearth, into the Golden Reserve line. It wasn't just a product. It was a philosophy, a connection to tradition fused with innovation. I developed the technique not just to preserve food, but to preserve flavor, to capture the fleeting peak of ripeness in a way no artificial method could. My mind raced back over the past few months, piecing together the subtle signs I had, perhaps foolishly, tried to ignore. Daniel suddenly showing an intense interest in the Golden Reserve production floor, asking technicians questions that went beyond casual curiosity. Finding Mr. Thorne, a process optimization consultant Robert had hired, snooping near my private lab area, asking Clara, my head of production, overly technical questions about incubation temperatures and atmospheric pressure controls that weren't in the standard protocol binders. Clara had pulled me aside just last week, her face etched with worry lines that hadn't been there a year ago. Stella, she'd murmured, glancing over her shoulder, Mr. Thorne is asking a lot of questions about the starter cultures. He's talking about finding a more standardized way to manage them, maybe even sourcing a commercial blend. A commercial blend. The thought sent a shiver down my spine. The Golden Reserve starter culture wasn't just a blend. It was a living thing, nurtured and adapted over years, responsive to minute environmental changes. It was the soul of the process. Thorne, with his slicked-back hair and dismissive attitude towards anything he couldn't quantify on a spreadsheet, saw it as a variable to be eliminated. That conversation with Clara had been the final confirmation. They weren't just giving Daniel oversight. They were trying to take the technique, to simplify it, to industrialize it, likely cutting corners I refused to touch. And they believed the binders I'd painstakingly created for the production team contained everything they needed. They were wrong. That night, I didn't dwell on the hurt. The time for tears would come later, maybe. Now was the time for action. I drove to the small, climate-controlled storage unit I rented years ago as a backup, a place where I kept my most precious, irreplaceable journals. The ones with the messy scribbles, the intuitive corrections, the notes on how humidity on a Tuesday affects a culture started on a Friday. More importantly, I checked on the small, specialized incubator I kept there. Inside were small vials of the mother cultures for my Golden Reserve starter, the true core, nurtured in secret, a living lineage only I had access to and understood how to maintain and propagate. It was my insurance policy, a silent line of code nobody could crack. I also returned to the company briefly, late at night. Using my key card, still active, I went to my old lab. I erased the digital access logs to my private network drive where some raw research data was stored, nothing critical for production, but revealing of my deeper methods. I checked the temperature and humidity controls in the main culture room, ensuring they were set exactly as documented, knowing Thorne would likely try to optimize them later based on standard factory specs, a change that would subtly but inevitably lead to issues without the counter-adjustments only I knew to make. I moved a specific set of hand-blown glass jars I used for small batch testing, jars calibrated to my needs, placing standard ones in their stead. Tiny details. Invisible tripwires to those who didn't truly understand. Clara texted me the next morning. They brought in Thorne. He's already changing the process flow. Says it's inefficient. I sighed, looking at the text. Inefficient. That's what they called mastery. The tension built over the next few days. Clara's updates were like watching a slow-motion train wreck. Thorne was implementing his changes, simplifying steps, suggesting cheaper alternative ingredients for the base fruit blend, dismissing the need for the specific, time-intensive conditioning phase I had developed. Daniel, out of his depth, seemed to defer entirely to Thorne, eager to show Robert that he could make the Golden Reserve more profitable and scalable without Stella's overly complicated methods. I knew they were preparing a large demonstration batch for Ms. Jenkins from Gourmet Grocers, a chain that could elevate Harvest and Hearth to a new level. This was the moment they planned to showcase Daniel's leadership and Thorne's optimization, built on the foundation I had created and they were now trying to steal. The thought made my stomach churn, a mix of anger and dread for my poor Golden Reserve. Miss Jenkins wasn't just any client. She was known for her discerning palate and her company's strict quality standards. Landing Gourmet Grocers would be transformative. Failing would be devastating. And I knew, with a certainty that chilled me, that without my specific knowledge, my unique starter, and my intuition, their attempt at mass-producing the Golden Reserve for this demo would fail. It wasn't sabotage. It was simply letting reality assert itself, letting the craft rebel against those who disrespected it. On the morning of the presentation, I wasn't at Harvest and Hearth. I was in my quiet apartment, the morning sun warming my face as I prepared a cup of tea, a calming ritual. I logged into a private video stream link Clara had discreetly sent me, ostensibly for key personnel to view major presentations remotely. The image on my screen flickered to life. I saw the prepared presentation room at Harvest and Hearth, a polished counter with gleaming jars, a small setup meant to demonstrate the process. Robert was at the podium, wearing his best suit, a forced smile on his face. Daniel stood beside him, looking nervous but trying to project confidence. Mr. Thorne hovered near the process setup, looking smug and ready. Miss Jenkins sat in the front row, notepad open, her expression sharp and observant. Robert began his speech, talking about Harvest and Hearth's legacy, its commitment to quality, and the exciting new chapter under Daniel's leadership, focusing on innovation and scalability. He spoke about the Golden Reserve line as their flagship, the product that would lead them into new markets. The words felt hollow, a performance built on a lie. Then, Daniel stepped forward to introduce the Golden Reserve and Mr. Thorne, who would demonstrate the optimized production process using a test batch prepared for the presentation. Thorne took over, explaining his streamlined steps, talking about efficiency and cost reduction. He was using the standard ingredients, the slightly altered temperatures, the simplified conditioning, all the changes I knew were wrong. As the demonstration proceeded, my heart ached. It was like watching someone butcher a beautiful piece of music, hitting all the notes but missing the melody entirely. Thorne poured liquids, mixed ingredients, adjusted dials with a show of confidence that bordered on arrogance. Daniel watched him, nodding along, trying to look knowledgeable. Then came the moment. They opened the incubator/curing unit where the demo batch was supposed to be reaching its critical stage. A subtle, unpleasant aroma filled the air, not the rich, complex scent of properly finished Golden Reserve, but something off, faintly metallic and acrid. Thorne frowned, tapping a gauge. Daniel's eyes widened slightly. Robert shifted in his seat. Miss Jenkins, ever observant, leaned forward. "Is that typical of the process?" she asked, her voice polite but cutting through the tense silence. Thorne stammered, trying to explain it away as a minor, temporary variation. He offered samples of the finished product from the demo batch. I watched as Ms. Jenkins took a small spoonful, tasted it, and her polite expression faltered for just a second before she carefully placed the spoon down. She didn't need to say anything. Her face said it all. The product was wrong. It lacked the signature depth, the nuanced flavor, the perfect texture that defined the Golden Reserve she was interested in. "Mr. Thorne," Ms. Jenkins said, her voice cool and professional, "the sample. It seems to lack the characteristic complexity and consistency we've come to expect from Harvest and Hearth's Golden Reserve. Can this process guarantee reliable results for large-scale orders?" Thorne launched into technical jargon about minor adjustments and scaling challenges, but his earlier confidence was gone. Daniel looked like he was going to be sick. Robert's face was a mask of barely concealed fury, aimed subtly at Daniel and Thorne. The demonstration had not just failed, it had exposed their inability to replicate the very product they were trying to sell. My trap, the inherent irreplicability of my craft without its master, had sprung. The calls started shortly after. First, Robert's assistant asking me to come in immediately. I didn't answer. Then Daniel, voice tight and panicked. "Stella, we need you." The demo. It didn't go as planned. Thorne messed something up. "You have to come fix it." Then Robert himself, his voice strained, trying to sound commanding but with an undercurrent of desperation. "Stella, what is the meaning of this? The Ms. Jenkins deal is on the line. Get over here and fix your process." I let the calls go to voicemail. Let them feel the full weight of their actions. They tried to take my creation, dismiss my value, and replace years of dedicated craft with a consultant's buzzwords and a brother's entitlement. Now they faced the consequences. An email arrived soon after, formal and stiff, from Robert's office. It requested a private dinner meeting that evening to discuss the future of the Golden Reserve line and your potential role in it. The location was Lavinia, my father's favorite restaurant, where we used to celebrate the company's successes. The same restaurant where, just a few years ago, he'd toasted the Golden Reserve for doubling our revenue. I considered ignoring it, but an old mentor's words echoed in my mind. Never walk away from the table when they finally admit they need you. Make them say it out loud. I dressed carefully, not in resignation, but with quiet strength. I arrived at Lavinia exactly on time. Robert was already seated at our usual corner table, a glass of wine in hand, the menu untouched. He stood when he saw me, a rare gesture these days. "Stella," he said, his voice attempting warmth but failing. "Dad," I replied, giving a short nod as I took the seat across from him. There were no hugs, no pretenses of affection. Just two people with a complicated history, facing off over a business empire. He studied me, searching my face for something. Anger, sadness, a willingness to bend. He found none. "You look well," he offered, making small talk. I said, my gaze steady. He cleared his throat. "You've made quite an impact today." "Funny," I said, a small, humorless smile touching my lips. "I've been making the Golden Reserve's impact for years. You just weren't looking." That silenced him for a moment. Then came the sigh, the one I knew so well, a mix of frustration and forced humility. "All right, Stella," he began, leaning forward. "Let's not mince words." The presentation was a disaster. Thorne, his methods were clearly inadequate. We made miscalculations regarding the process and your role. He paused, searching my face again. "You've built something extraordinary with Golden Reserve. It's clear Daniel isn't ready to oversee it at this level. And Mr. Thorne clearly doesn't understand the nuances." "Nuances," I echoed dryly. "That's what you call the heart and soul I poured into 15 years of work? The living cultures I nurtured? The intuition developed through thousands of hours of trial and error." He shifted uncomfortably. "Stella, I understand you're upset. We want to bring you back in." Daniel agrees. "The board is prepared to offer you a co-director position, the same salary as him, shared oversight of the Golden Reserve project, and a retroactive bonus." "No," I interrupted, my voice quiet but firm, cutting through his rehearsed offer. "Let's not pretend this is about fairness or reconciliation. You didn't come here to offer me a seat at the table you kicked me from. You came here because the Golden Reserve cannot be reliably replicated at scale without me. You came because Ms. Jenkins walked away and the company's future is uncertain. You came because you lost control." His jaw tightened. "You're not being reasonable." "Reasonable?" I felt the years of swallowed frustration rise. "Dad, I gave my life to this business, to the Golden Reserve. I gave up relationships, personal time, security from offers at huge corporations because I believed in Harvest and Hearth, in your vision. And when my creation became the engine driving this company, you tried to hand it to Daniel like a participation trophy, dismissing my craft as something simple enough for Thorne to optimize away." "Daniel has ambition," Robert countered, his voice rising slightly. "He has a knack for business." "No," I snapped, my own voice gaining strength. "He has ambition, and you tried to hand him mine. You gave away my legacy." We sat in silence for a long moment, the elegant restaurant table a battleground. He was the father who had betrayed his daughter. I was the daughter who had proven she held the keys to the kingdom. Finally, quietly, he asked the question I had waited for. "What do you want, Stella?" "I already told your assistant my terms," I said, leaning back slightly. "Formal recognition as the creator and master artisan of the Golden Reserve technique, majority ownership of the Golden Reserve IP, and full creative control over its production, sourcing, and future development. And $5 million in retroactive compensation for the unauthorized attempts to use and replicate my work without my involvement or permission." His eyes widened slightly. "That's outrageous." "That," I said calmly, "is generous. I could have walked away entirely, taking my knowledge and master cultures with me. I could have let the company flounder, explained publicly why the Golden Reserve suddenly lost its magic. I could expose exactly how you tried to erase me." "You wouldn't do that," he said, a flicker of his old dismissive confidence returning. "Wouldn't I?" I met his gaze steadily. "You raised me, Dad. You taught me to protect what I build. You just never expected I'd have to apply that lesson to you." He looked away then, for the first time truly acknowledging the shift in power. Maybe it was shame, or maybe just pragmatism. But he saw that I wasn't the little girl seeking his approval anymore. I was the woman who held the future of his company in her hands. The check arrived. He paid. As we stood, he spoke, his voice low. "I'll have legal draw up the documents." "Good," I said. "And Dad," he looked up surprised I added something else. "I'm not coming back to be your employee or Daniel's consultant. I'm coming back as your partner in Golden Reserve. Don't forget that." He gave a slow, almost imperceptible nod. "Understood." I walked out into the cool night air. The city felt quiet, reset. My phone buzzed. An email notification. From Miss Jenkins. "Stella, I heard about the technical issues today." I was disappointed, as Golden Reserve truly is a remarkable product. If Harvest and Hearth can guarantee consistency and a reliable process, my offer still stands. I value authenticity. Perhaps we could discuss this with the original developer? A small smile touched my lips. The world was ready for authenticity. By Monday morning, the building looked the same, but the air felt different. Staff members straightened up as I walked by. Marcus, the security guard who used to just nod, gave me a crisp, respectful "Good morning, Miss Stella." My new access badge felt heavy and right in my hand. It read, "Stella, your last name, partner and chief craftsmanship officer." The elevator ride felt surreal. My floor, once my bustling innovation hub, had been quieted. My nameplate was gone, replaced by Daniel, his last name, Director of Strategy. Strategy for what? I wasn't sure. I didn't knock. Daniel was at my old desk, looking ruffled, papers scattered around him. He looked up, his face tightening the moment he saw me. "Stella." "Daniel," I said calmly. "Looks like you've redecorated." He stood up, defensive. "What are you doing here?" "After what you pulled." I gave him a small, cool smile. What I pulled was ensuring my life's work wasn't destroyed by incompetence and arrogance. "Funny, I thought that's what you were doing when you and Thorne tried to steal my process." "We weren't stealing," he protested. "We were a team." Dad said. "Don't put this on Dad." I cut him off, my voice firm. "He may have signed the papers, but you went along with it. You let Thorne dismantle my process, dismiss my experience, and try to take credit for something you don't understand. You used my trust to undermine me." He sat back down, deflating slightly. "So what now?" "You're just back." "I'm back," I confirmed, walking further into the office that used to be mine. "But nothing is the same. I've reviewed the documents. I have majority control over the Golden Reserve IP. All production, all sourcing, all future development runs through me. And you're no longer authorized to touch any part of the Golden Reserve process or its materials." His mouth dropped open. "That's ridiculous. You can't just." "I can," I said, placing a printed copy of the signed agreement on the corner of the desk. And I did. He stared at the document as if it were written in a foreign language. "So, you're just going to be Dad's equal now." "Daniel," I said, my voice softening slightly but losing none of its resolve. "I'm not interested in being Dad's equal in the traditional sense. My interest is in protecting the Golden Reserve, the craft, and the values it represents. If you want to find success here, find your own passion, build your own legacy. But Golden Reserve, that's mine now. Officially, permanently." I turned to leave, pausing at the doorway. "You could have just asked, I said, looking back at him. "If you wanted to be part of building the Golden Reserve, truly building it, I would have guided you, shared my knowledge. But instead, you chose to take a shortcut. You let Dad and Thorne convince you that entitlement could replace skill. That kind of thinking, it has consequences." I walked out, leaving him sitting there in silence. Later that day, sitting in my new, smaller but functional office, a space I chose deliberately closer to the test kitchens than the executive suites, I looked over the production reports. Since I'd reinstated the proper protocols and reintroduced the master cultures, the Golden Reserve production was back on track, yielding perfect batches. It wasn't just functioning, it was thriving. Clara knocked softly and came in, a list of upcoming production schedules in her hand. "Stella," she said, her face beaming, "we've had 3 new inquiries just this morning, and Miss Jenkins confirmed her order, doubling the initial volume she discussed." She specifically mentioned she was impressed with the integrity of the craft when you spoke. I smiled. Schedule them, Clara. But ensure every new contract includes our ethical craftsmanship protocol. Clara raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Ethical craftsmanship? Yes, I explained. From now on, every Golden Reserve batch is tracked from source to jar. We ensure fair practices with our growers, meticulous adherence to the true process, no shortcuts, no substitutes, and complete transparency in our methods for anyone who truly wants to learn. We're not just making food, we're building trust. I won't let this craft become just another corporate product stripped of its soul. She smiled, a genuine, relieved smile. That's necessary, Stella. We saw what happens when that's forgotten. After she left, I leaned back in my chair. The office was quiet, filled only by the faint, comforting aromas drifting up from the kitchens below. For the first time in a long time, I felt a profound sense of control. Not over others, but over myself, my work, and the destiny of the beautiful thing I had built. I checked my inbox. One new message. From my father. Subject: the documents. Stella, I have reviewed the documents. I understand the terms. You have made your position clear. For what it is worth, I am proud of what you have built. Even if I didn't show it the right way. Dad. I didn't reply. Not out of anger anymore, but because the conversation had already been had, the boundaries drawn. In that silence, a new chapter began. Harvest and Hearth was still a family business, but the heart of it, the Golden Reserve, was undeniably and irrevocably mine. Months passed. The Golden Reserve line didn't just recover, it soared. We secured contracts with major national retailers, expanded our product offerings within the line, and received accolades not just for taste, but for our commitment to quality and ethical sourcing, the pillars of my craftsmanship protocol. I was invited to speak at industry conferences, featured in magazines, hailed as an innovator who bridged tradition and modern business. Offers poured in from venture capitalists eager to invest or buy me out. I declined them all. This wasn't about cashing in. It was about owning my creation and ensuring its integrity was never compromised again. Within the company, the atmosphere had shifted. People were cautious at first, unsure of my return, but my focus on the craft, on quality, and on valuing the skills of the production team earned their respect quickly. I led with clarity, not vengeance. Robert maintained appearances, praising my success publicly at shareholder meetings and company events. But behind closed doors, our relationship remained formal, professional, a quiet acknowledgement of the new power dynamic. The warmth of father-daughter was replaced by the cool respect of business partners. Daniel kept his distance. After the dust settled, he moved into a role focused on less critical product lines and strategic partnerships, unnecessary if unstated, step back from the core operations he couldn't handle. I rarely interacted with him directly, but sometimes I'd catch a glimpse of him standing near the glass wall overlooking the Golden Reserve production area, watching the team meticulously work on a batch, his expression unreadable. Perhaps he was seeing, for the first time, the true complexity and care that went into the craft he had tried so easily to claim. I hadn't set out to take over the company, or even to get revenge. My only goal was to protect my creation, to ensure the Golden Reserve remained the authentic, high-quality product I knew it could be. But in protecting my work, I had protected myself, reclaimed my value, and forged a path forward where my passion and expertise were not just acknowledged, but were the very foundation of success. The heirloom jars gleamed on the shelves, filled with the rich golden fruit of my labor, a silent testament that true value lies not in ownership on paper, but in the heart and skill of the creator.